Hi, this is Clint Lanier, Professor of Professional Communication, currently at New Mexico State University. I want to talk today about persuasion and professional writing. This is actually a very important topic. It's a topic that a lot of people ask me about, students ask me about all the time. They seem to have this notion that professional writing has nothing to do with persuasion, that the two are different. And they usually think of persuasion in terms of marketing, but in fact, persuasion plays a very big role in professional writing and in technical communication in general. And so let's talk about how it does so and how you can use persuasion within professional writing. So again, people ask me, do you need persuasion skills in the workplace? And my answer is yes, for these particular reasons here. So proposals and bids, for example, engineering firms write these all the time. They're the most obvious form. You're attempting to get someone to recognize the worth of your organization's plan and grant you your request. So if the government puts out a bid for proposal, or a request for proposal rather, for building a new bridge, for example, your construction company wants to build that bridge. What makes you better than a different construction company? You have to, in other words, use persuasion to show them that your plan, the bridge you're going to build, is better, and that maybe you have more experience or something. Another place would be journal articles. If you ever want to publish in a journal article, then you need to attempt to persuade editors and peers of the worth and validity of your findings. Think of lab reports also. You want to ensure that they see your lab reports as correct. Well, persuasive elements are used to do this. And finally, program reviews, assessments, those types of things. So you're attempting to persuade decision makers of the worth of your work. So in other words, persuasion is used throughout professional communication, it's used throughout technical communication, and it's used throughout technical disciplines. Just about any type of technical discipline will use some type of persuasion. People say, can't I just present my findings? Well, I talk all the time about audience. No, you can't, because not everyone will read, not everyone reading that communication will be in your discipline. So an engineer reading about a plan to build a bridge might see that the bridge is great, and it's going to be better than the different type of bridge that somebody else will build. But it's not just engineers that will be reading that bid. You'll have administrators, you'll have accountants, you'll have people that don't have the same skills. They're not engineers, for example. And this, again, crosses all the disciplines. And interpretation. Not everyone reads data the same way. You and I can look at a graph, and we will come away from that graph with a different point of view, even though it's the same graph. This happens all the time, so oftentimes we have to tell our reader, this is what you should see when you look at that graph. Okay? So remember audience and interpretation. Because of these two things, you're going to absolutely have to use persuasion within professional writing. What are the basic ingredients? Here we go. Claim, evidence, and data. Claim, most obviously, is simply that. You have to have a claim in order to make an argument. So your claim is whatever it is you're arguing. We should be the ones that build that bridge. We should be the firm that builds that bridge. Or even, I should be the person that you hire for that job. Those are both claims, and those are both arguments. Now you have to prove that claim. You have to prove that argument through two things, evidence and data. Okay? If we drill down a little bit more, we'll see that there's different types of evidence and there's different types of data depending on what type of evidence we present. Three different types of evidence are ethos, pathos, and logos. You might have heard of these before in a argument class, or perhaps in your freshman English class. These are three different types of arguments, or arguments from ethos, pathos, and logos. And different types of data, examples, deduction, induction. These are ways that we present data in order to create evidence to prove our claim. Let's drill down a little bit more, look at types of evidence in depth. We'll start with ethos. This is trying to persuade someone just by using your own credibility as evidence. And here are some statements that would be using ethos. I've been working here for 20 years, and I think that we should do X, Y, or Z. Your statement, I've been working here for 20 years, says that you're credible, that you have knowledge about whatever it is you're going to state your opinion on, and therefore that's your evidence for your opinion being correct. Next, you can say, I'm a professional engineer, and in my opinion, we should build this bridge. Well, you're stating that your credentials, professional engineer, give you enough credibility to state an opinion on that particular subject, say building the bridge or whatever. And then finally, I've done extensive research on the subject, and we should choose this option. Okay? Your statement, I've done extensive research on the subject, is stating I'm credible enough. You can trust me in order to make this opinion and to take this option. Okay? The next type is pathos. It's trying to persuade somebody by making them feel emotional about it. I know if you've ever been up late at night watching TV, if you watch TV, you've seen those commercials, feed the poor, helpless children, and they always show a poor little shoeless child in some village in some remote country. And there's somebody saying, won't you just give $1 a day or something to feed this poor little child? They don't provide any evidence. We don't know where that child lives. We don't know what that child's situation is. We don't know how much the organization that's making this commercial is getting off of the money that they're trying to raise. They're just trying to make you feel emotional about it. So they show you all these pictures of these poor kids. It works the same way with the picture from the Humane Society or whatever it is, where they want you to donate to save the poor animals, and they show all these pictures of poor little animals in cages and stuff, and you feel so bad that you cry and you send them some money. Next, a politician, for example, might say, we need to pull the troops out of this particular country. We're spending $10 million a day there. They don't provide any evidence for any of this, any rationale. It's just trying to make you feel mad or guilty. Look at our political climate. Matter of fact, look at your Facebook feed right now. 9 times out of 10, every meme that's on there, especially if it's political, is trying to make you feel a certain way about something. They don't offer any logic, any rationale for what they're saying. They're just trying to make you feel mad or scared or angry or guilty or whatever in order to make you do something. So that's pathos. The next is logos. It's trying to persuade someone by using logical rationale. And this, unfortunately, doesn't happen very often anymore. But these are some examples. So according to figure 1, and then we should do this. Figure 1 obviously would show an image or show a data that would support whatever it is we're talking about. The next is A equals B and C equals A, therefore B equals A, right? A syllogism. And then lastly, for example, X, Y, and Z. Okay, X, Y, and Z would be data to back up logos as our evidence. So how do we utilize this evidence? Well, in ethos, again, authority or credibility has to be established. And you can do this through your expertise or through your education or through your experience. Your expertise could be in a particular thing. You could be an auto mechanic, and therefore you could say, well, I'm an auto mechanic, and I'm qualified to talk about this particular car. Through your education, in my case, maybe through a PhD, it says that I have expertise or I have the credibility to talk about whatever it is I'm supposed to talk about. And then finally, your experience. If you say you're a soldier and you served in a particular capacity in the U.S. Army, well, that gives you ethos to argue about some particular thing in the U.S. Army that I don't have, and I can never reproduce that because I don't have the experience. You can also use another's credibility to substitute for your own. So I could say, in my opinion, as a PhD, X, Y, or Z, or you could say, well, according to Dr. Lanier, X, Y, or Z. So if I stated it, you could use what I state to create your own ethos, your own ethos rather, for the argument. So, and then for pathos, understand that using pure emotion is actually kind of dangerous. It's probably the weakest of all the types of evidence. It works really well in the short term, but in the long term, it always falls apart. And as a matter of fact, Aristotle, which is where we got all these from, says that it's the weakest and you shouldn't use it. However, it still can be used within your professional communication. You can, for example, create visual images for your reader. So a stunning 3D image of the bridge that you want to build, it can go beyond just some type of wire rendering, and you can do some type of computer-aided drafting where it's a beautiful bridge with cars on it, people walking on the side, and recreate kind of the feeling of what that bridge would be like. Well, that's pathos, and that's using emotion to go beyond just the argument. When appropriate, you can also use emotional adjectives, so you can describe what that bridge would look like. Is it spectacular, and is it a beautiful bridge? It goes beyond, again, just saying that it's this many feet high and this many feet long. I suggest that you use sparingly and for the knockout punch of a communication. So your proposal for building that bridge wouldn't be filled with these types of image, and it wouldn't be filled with these types of emotional adjectives. You would use them sparingly in the appropriate places, and you can still use it. Obviously, the most convincing of the three types of evidence is logos, and there's many types of data that you could use to create your logos. There is, for example, deduction. It's building a point out of many specific instances. This is what we do with surveys, for example. We say that 100 people feel this way about it, so this is how they feel about it. This is how everybody feels about it. So it's building a single point out of many instances. Experiments do the same thing. When scientists come to a conclusion, it's not after a single experiment, it's after maybe 50, 60, 70 experiments. So after all of those experiments, it tells them this one thing. Each of these experiments demonstrates X, therefore X must be true. The next type we have is induction. That's narrowing to a specific instance from a larger point. So it's kind of the inverse. We could say because X is true, an experiment would demonstrate X. So because the law of gravity were true, if I were to drop something, it would fall to the floor because of gravity. So we could say this one particular instance is because of all of these. Some other types, examples, are great ways to demonstrate logos. So the Challenger incident is an example of a breakdown in communication. There's also precedence. Precedence is when something happened in the past, we can pretty much be sure that it's going to happen again. So in the past, engineers have had problems communicating clearly. Now, that's what happened in the past, so it will probably happen again. And then finally, analogies. This incident is like the Challenger incident, therefore this is what's going to happen. Or this incident is like that one, so the same thing is going to happen. It's a very powerful way to argue because you're using something that's already happened. What's nice about precedents and analogies and examples, well, precedents and analogies especially, if it's already happened in the past, you don't have to recreate the argument. You simply point to the previous version or the other version in the case of analogies and say, look what happened over there, therefore this should happen too. In these two cases, what you need to do is prove that the two things are similar. Okay? And if you prove these two things are similar and that something happened in the past to one thing, then we can be pretty sure it's going to happen to this thing because look how similar they are. Okay? And examples kind of the same way. You have to prove similarity between two examples. So if you say this is an example of that, you kind of have to show how they're examples. Now, how do you actually use these methods? It starts with audience, and it's always going to start with audience. Use audience analysis techniques. So first of all, what type of document does the reader want? You might know that there are standard methods for writing anything. So a memo should be written a certain way. A report should be written a certain way. If you understand that your audience is expecting that type of document, well, that gives you a good place to start because you know how reports are supposed to be organized, for example. Next, you ask, what information is the audience looking for? Are they looking for bottom line information? Are they looking for statistics? Or are they looking for methodology, how to perform an action or something? Again, figure out what your user or what your reader wants, and then understand how to give that to them. Give them that type of information. Also, how much do they already know about you? This is your own ethos. For example, if you say, my name is Bill, let me talk to you about technology, that doesn't mean anything to an audience. If you say, my name is Bill Gates, let me talk to you about technology, people will listen to what Bill Gates has to say because they know a lot about him. So he has this kind of ethos. He can talk about technology. So how much do they already know about you? If they don't know anything about you, then you're going to have to introduce yourself. Tell them about yourself and build that ethos. In a request for proposal, for example, this is the part about your organization. This is why our construction company should build that bridge. And these are all the bridges we built in the past and so forth. So it's creating that ethos. Also, what cultural considerations might there be, if any? This is pathos. That first line there, you won't be treated like a guinea pig. This is something that we would say in the United States, in a Western culture, well, specifically in the United States, it means you won't be treated as something that we're going to conduct experiments on. In some countries of the world, however, they eat guinea pigs, so this might sound kind of weird. Next, the bride was radiant in her long white gown. Well, in certain cultures, white is actually the color of mourning. They would wear that when somebody that they love has died. So that might seem a little bit odd that here in the United States, brides wear white, which is here it's kind of a symbol of purity and so forth. So try to figure out what kind of cultural considerations there might be. Next, selecting and using evidence. Remember that quotes are used for ethos, not to prove something. Okay, it's somebody speaking for you. It's somebody that is held in high regard. So if you're quoting a famous scientist, for example, his quote, his or her quote, isn't proof itself. However, you're raising the ethos by stating that, and readers will then say, oh, well, if so-and-so thinks that, then maybe I should think that as well. Citations are also ethos. It shows that you did research. It's ethos for you. This is why citations and research in general is so important. It's not just to prove how much knowledge there is about it, but it's to prove your argument. It's to help us accept what you're saying. If I see that you did a bunch of research about something, plus all the research says that, then I can probably agree with your point. Conducting your own research can be used as logical evidence. So surveys, experiments, test data, doing your own primary research can be used as logical evidence, because if you conduct a survey, then you can create a deduction or inductive reasoning, apply that to it, and prove your point. Graphics are utilized as examples. If you show a picture of something, it's going to be an example of what it is. So that bridge, when you show a picture of that bridge, this is an example of what we are going to build, and this is what it will look like. Documented analogies and examples should also be used. So you refer to past things that happened, you look at precedents, but those, again, they have to be cited, and they have to be proven. And in that case, you would want to prove that your argument is like something that already happened.